Hi everyone, Dumpster Dolly here. Today I'm going to take on the daunting task of making an ultimate guide to ear stretching. I'm going to tell you every single thing I know about stretching your ears, how to take care of them, how to actually stretch them, how long to wait after you get them pierced, etc., etc. Now this is a mouthful, there's a lot to explain, and I don't know if I'll be able to fit it in one video, but if I do, then that's great, and if I don't, then that's great too, because you could just watch another part, if there is a part two. I have all my information that I wrote down on my handy dandy tablet, and I'm going to share this information with you step by step. So here we go. Part 1, sizing. First of all, jewelry sizes are described in measurements known as gauges. Gauges are not what you call jewelry, they are the size of the jewelry, like I mentioned. The jewelry is called plugs, tunnels, spirals, talons, etc., or you could just call it jewelry. But I've noticed that a lot of people attack others for calling them gauges when really, if someone's not educated on a certain word, if someone doesn't have the same vocabulary as you, it's no means to bash them. If somebody doesn't call them the correct thing, if like somebody's passing me on the street, let's say, and say, "Oh, nice gauges," I say thanks. I don't say, "Oh, they're called plugs and tunnels, you retard." No, I just no. I occasionally correct them, but I do it nicely, and I say, "Oh, these are called tunnels," and they're not called gauges. It's good that if you do know the proper terminology, but it's not essential to stretching your ears as long as you're doing it properly. It doesn't matter what you call what's in your ears. Anyways, back to the topic. As the size of the jewelry gets bigger, the number of the gauge gets smaller. So, for example, 6 gauge is smaller than 4 gauge, and they're all measured in even numbers. So 0 gauge is bigger than 2 gauge, 2 gauge is bigger than 4 gauge, 4 gauge is bigger than 6 gauge, etc., etc. A normal earlobe piercing hole is about a 16 or an 18 gauge, most likely an 18 gauge, maybe even a 20. And that's the size of a pin, like that's really thin, it's really small. And that's what most people have because, or at least girls, because a lot of girls get their ears pierced when they're little or when they're babies. And if you get your ears pierced with a gun, which is bad, but I can't change the past, so, if they're all healed up nicely, that's great. You're very lucky. If they are at, normal piercing size, you should normally start stretching at a 16 gauge. Then you move on to 14, and then 12, and then 10, and then 8, and yada 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 yada. Gauges can also be measured in millimeters depending on which area of the world you're from. I'm in Canada, so people say the word gauges more often, but in Europe, people measure them by millimeters usually. Like for example, 8 gauge is 3 millimeters, and I don't know the exact millimeters of everything, but I know 0 is 8 millimeters. No. Yeah, it is. Sorry for my ignorance on that matter. I'm not too familiar with the millimeters in gauge form. But gauges generally it usually stops saying gauge after the measurement at 00. I've seen 000 and even quadruple 0 being passed around, but that's really rare. After 00, pretty much it goes in millimeters, so you should know your sizes. Or, besides millimeters, it can also go in fractions. In the US, I know they use fractions to measure their jewelry sizes. Now, most places do measure in fractions, but if you don't know your fractions, most jewelry websites have a conversion chart where they say what fraction equals how many millimeters. Like, for people who aren't good at fractions, I personally am good at fractions, so that's what I use. You can use millimeters because it's a lot easier. So as the sizes of the jewelry get bigger, each measurement or each increment of how much bigger the jewelry gets bigger, if that makes sense. The next size in fractions after 00 is 7/16, which is almost 8/16, which is almost a ½ inch. So it goes 00, 7/16, a ½ inch. Each size moves up at 1/16 of an inch. So let's say I'm at 7/16, then I go to 8/16, which is a ½ inch, and then 9/16, 10/16, and the 16/16 is an inch. So you're measuring like little bits of an inch basically. 00 is 8 millimeters, so if you're going in millimeters, it's 8 millimeters, then 10, then 12. Easy enough. Now again, if you've had your ears pierced for many years, if you've had them done when you were young or whatever, you can start stretching right away, but just don't skip sizes, obviously. Just start at a 16, or if you're already at a 16, then move on to a 14. And what you do stretch with is tapers at that size normally, which I'll be explaining later in the video. Part 2, initial piercing. Now, if you've just gotten your ears pierced, or your ears aren't pierced yet, but you're planning on getting them pierced very soon, you should wait quite a bit before starting to stretch, because the longer you wait, the better, essentially. With stretching, even, like, stretching anything, like, the longer you wait, the better. I didn't even get my ears pierced a year ago, so I did stretch pretty fast in the beginning, but I've stayed at, what is this, 9/16 for about a month so far now, and before that I was at a 1/2 inch for 2 months. Like, I'm slowing down a lot, and I'm actually going to downsize, which I'll explain again later in the video. And back to the gauging thing, it's not called gauging, it's called stretching, but that goes in the same vein. If somebody calls it gauging, you don't have to scream at them for it, you don't have to be rude. Just, if they don't know the word, they don't know the word, you know? It's not like, they're committing some kind of crime by saying that. If you absolutely can't wait to stretch your ears after getting them pierced, I'd say wait at least 9 months. I waited 3. And, that comes with most people who stretch their ears. They make mistakes. I clearly made a mistake, and I don't advise anyone waiting that period of time. Even though I had no problems, that's just me. You could get terrible problems from that, so just wait at least 9 months. Oddly enough, I found this question was seldom answered in the online community. I searched how long you should wait before stretching your ears after getting them pierced, and there wasn't much concrete evidence, or concrete answers, rather. Like, everybody said something different. So I just say, I just settle on 9 months because it was the average time that most people said. Like, some people said a year, some people said 6 months, so, I averaged it out. I got my ears pierced at an 8 gauge. If you're planning on stretching, I do advise getting your ears pierced at a larger gauge. But I wouldn't go any bigger than 6, because you can get them pierced up to a 0, but if you're going to a really large size, such as an inch and bigger, then you should just get them pierced at an 8 or a 6, I think. If you want to stay at a 0, then you can get them pierced at a 0. Not a lot of shops do it, but I do know of shops that do it, so yeah. Part 3, stretching. Now, once your ears are ready to stretch, you know your ears are ready to stretch when you pull on them. Well, your piercings are healed, first of all, when you pull on them and they don't hurt. You're ready to stretch when you pull on it and there's a little bit of space, or enough space to cram in, not cram in, because that sounds kind of, savage, but to fit in another size. For materials for stretching your ears and for wearing with a fresh stretch, you should only use steel, titanium, which is a kind of metal, niobium, which is another kind of metal, and titanium and niobium are a little more expensive, but they're really good quality. And obviously implant grade steel is the best. And glass is also a good thing to stretch with, actually. Yeah, glass is completely safe, and all of these are safe for stretching because they're not porous. That means they don't have a whole bunch of microscopic little holes that can hold on to bacteria and nasty things. There are many other things that jewelry is made of, such as wood, acrylic, which is plastic, like I said, bone, horn, organic materials, stone, things like that. But those are all porous. Like, to explain porous more, you know how your skin has pores, like little holes that, cause pimples and stuff? That's what they have. They, have little holes in them. Even though it looks like you can't see them, or you actually can't see them, they're there. And they cannot be properly sterilized. All of the materials I listed, like glass, steel, titanium, and niobium, can be properly sterilized. Now, the types of materials you should use while stretching your piercings at smaller sizes. Tapers, but never wear them as jewelry. Slide them in, and then put your jewelry, like a plug or a tunnel, in right after. Do not wear them. Claws or talons. This is a 6 gauge. Pinchers. These are 00. And spirals. These are 2 gauge. These are really pretty. I wish I could still wear them. One of my biggest pieces of advice is that you stop using these to stretch after 2 gauge. As I've explained, the increments of measurement after 2 gauge, up to 0, then up to 00, then up to 7/16, they all get substantially bigger as you go on. So there's only 1 millimeter difference between 4 gauge and 2 gauge, but there's a 2 millimeter difference between 2 gauge and 0 gauge. That's why a lot of people have trouble stretching their ears to 0. I've had many friends complain about how much it hurts, but that's why you should stop using blunt objects like pinchers, talons, spirals, and especially tapers. What I suggest is you get yourself a pair of tunnels like these. These are 0 gauge tunnels. And you use the taping method. If you use things like tapers to stretch after 2 gauge, you have a real risk of damaging your ears. Once you're ready to stretch to 0 gauge, I strongly suggest the taping method, like I said. And you could find a video that I did on how to do the taping method right here. Click on the link if you want to see how to use the taping method. You should never, ever, ever skip sizes. Ever. Don't do it. I may have stretched fast in the beginning, but I never skipped sizes. That's the number one thing that you should not do, especially not with tapers. Now, what happens when you skip sizes? There's a really, really big chance of you getting blowout. Now, what exactly is blowout? It's essentially, you know, the inside of your piercing, okay, I'll show you. When the inside part of your piercing, the inside skin, gets pushed out to the outside and it makes a bubble-like thing, like a ring around the back or the front of your jewelry, depending which way you push your taper or your spiral or whatever you're stretching with. Now, blowout is, you know, ugly. It shows that you don't stretch properly. You'll be looked down upon by the body modification community. But if you already do have blowout, you shouldn't be ashamed of it, really, because, you know, everybody makes mistakes. Like I said, I've even made mistakes with stretching my ears. I'm lucky I don't have blowout, but that's mostly due to the fact that I didn't skip sizes. You also risk necrosis of the skin, which essentially splits your ear in half. It involves the tissue in your earlobe rotting, and I don't think anybody wants that. And if you do, then I don't know what to say. Sorry if that was gross, but that's a real risk when you stretch improperly. Now I'm going to explain tapers. They're these things. They sell them at Hot Topic. They even sell them at some random girly accessory stores here. And this is a 4 gauge taper. This is what I use to stretch. I honestly don't advise using tapers that often, especially acrylic ones like these. Acrylic is plastic, by the way. It's best to use steel ones because it's just a blunt force of shoving it in, and that's really, really not that safe. It's safer than, let's say, just cramming in the next size of jewelry, which is called dead stretching, which I also don't recommend. But anywho, as you can see, these have black elastics on them called O-rings. Those are called O-rings, which means I'm trying to slide this down. See, like that. So they're insinuating that you should be wearing these as jewelry. Don't do that at all. Another mistake I made was when I got my ears pierced at 8 gauge, I wore 8 gauge tapers as jewelry for about 2 months, and luckily that didn't mess up my ears because it was a smaller size. But if you wear tapers at all, anything bigger than a 6 gauge or even an 8 gauge, it'll mess up your ears. It'll make the bottom or the back of your piercing lower than the front of your piercing, and it'll drag your ears down, and it won't stretch them anymore. It'll just make them lopsided and weird looking. Also, in stretching your ears, when you just have a fresh stretch, you should treat it as if it's a fresh piercing. You should baby it. Part 4, upkeep or maintenance. Now that you've stretched your ears, how do you care for them? How do you maintain them? This goes for freshly done piercings as well, even if they're on the face or, somewhere else. This is just general aftercare for new piercings or freshly stretched piercings. Use a shot glass or whatever works for you. A shot glass is most common. Fill it with lukewarm water, not hot, not cold, not room temperature, just a little warmer than room temperature. And dissolve about 1/4 teaspoon of sea salt, not table salt, sea salt. You dissolve that in the water. Make sure it's nice and dissolved and it's a nice even mixture, and put your ear in the shot glass and leave it there for 10 to 15 minutes. Do the same with the other ear. Do this twice a day, every day for 2 weeks. If you're doing it for another piercing, like say your nose or your lip or something like that, it takes 3 to 6 weeks to do that. Or if your ears are freshly pierced. When it comes to stretching, it could be 1 to 2 weeks that you can do that. When you're done, turn your jewelry, either move it back and forth, or if it's a tunnel, then turn it like this, back and forth. to make sure it's loose and it's not fusing to your skin. Then rinse the solution off with water and pat your ears dry with a clean towel. Then take your jewelry out, and unless it's a fresh piercing, in which you should use your jewelry in, this is just for fresh stretches or healed piercings. Take your jojoba oil. This is jojoba oil. It's spelled like jojoba oil, in case you don't know how that's spelled. Bio oil, emu oil, or vitamin E oil work just as well. Grab that and massage your earlobes. Well, I'll show you how right now, actually. You take your plug out. You take your oil. You put a little bit on your ear, like that. And you massage it. Like that. Move in little circles and pull your ear down like this so you can get more blood flow to your earlobe, and it helps it heal faster. Like that. And do that for about 5 to 10 minutes, twice a day, just like the sea salt soaks. And these oil massages are a maintenance thing. You don't have to do the sea salt soaks when your ears are healed, although it does help a little bit, but you have to do the jojoba oil or emu oil or etc. massages twice a day, or at least once a day, no matter what, like as long as your ears are stretched. This will keep your ears healthy and strong and, you know, happy. Now, another trick of the trade, I mentioned downsizing earlier in the video. Downsizing is when you take a smaller piece of jewelry and put it in your ear. Like, let's say I'm at 9/16 right now. I could take a 00 or a 1/2 inch and put that in there, wait for my ear to shrink up, and then stretch it back up again. And you have to make sure your ears are completely healed at that size first. Like, I have to make sure my ears are completely healed at 9/16 before I downsize. And that builds up collagen in the tissue in your earlobes, which means you'll get thicker, healthier earlobes. I know it seems like a lot of work and a lot of commitment, but that's what comes with stretching your ears. I've seen a lot of people do a lot of crazy things. I've seen terrible pictures of what stretching can do when it goes wrong. And, you know, it's better to take care of your ears in the long run. And it's not a race. If you really want to do it that fast and get really huge ears really fast, you're not doing it for the right reasons. I mean, I want to go pretty big with my ears. I'm about 1/3 of the way there. But I'm being patient because I know that I'd rather have big ears that look healthy of a few years down the line than have, you know, big ears that look really, really shitty in a few months. Be kind to your ears and your ears will be kind to you. So I guess that's it for this video. I think that's all I know about stretching ears. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and remember to comment, rate, and subscribe. Bye-bye.